Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Meg Fournier. I'm the Interim Director of Media and Performing Arts here at the Maine Arts Commission. Before I hand it off to David Greenham to introduce our program today, I wanted to give you all a quick little tour of our virtual conversation space here today. We just posted this in the chat, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from. And also, talk amongst yourself, all that fun stuff. Towards the end of the discussion, we will have an open Q&A where attendees can post questions to our lovely panel here today. If you can post those questions in the Q&A box, it's down at the bottom of your screen. If you can post your questions there instead of in the chat box, we'll be able to keep track of it a little bit better. So thank you for that. But you're welcome to post questions as you think of them, but we'll get to those open questions towards the end of the presentation. Or into the discussion. So as we gather today from various spaces all over the state and beyond, we do want to take a moment and acknowledge the ancestral lands around us all. Here at the Maine Arts Commission, we recognize that we are in the homeland of the Wabanaki and that the places in which we live, work, and hold events are parts of Indigenous lands. We extend our respect and our gratitude to the individuals and communities of the Abenaki, Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot nations. I'll be posting a link in the chat box here in a bit. It's a native land map, and we encourage you all to save this link and learn more about the native land that you occupy and how to compose your own unique land acknowledgement statements that are local to your own community. Now I want to introduce our new interim executive director of the Maine Arts Commission, a familiar face in a new role, David Green.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Meg. And welcome to this continued conversation about creating more welcoming and inclusive art spaces in Maine. Our first conversation took place in January as part of the virtual MICA conference. But of course, a single hour-long webinar was barely enough time to scratch the surface of this important topic and long overdue topic, I should add. And we are so grateful to our panelists for joining us again today, and we hope that this conversation will continue well beyond today and spread out actively around the state. We're very fortunate to have Marty Pottenger of Art at Work joining us today as our moderator and presenting partner for this event. Marty, who many of you know, is a theater artist, a playwright, activist, and a pioneer of arts-based civic dialogues. She's the founder of Art at Work, a national initiative putting creativity to work, strengthening city government's ability to meet challenges of inequity, partisanship, and climate emergency. I'm so happy to introduce my old friend, Marty Pottenger, to take it over. Welcome.
First, unmute. Memo to self. Thank you, David. Thank you, Meg. Unmuted. I see there's actually two of me. I'm so honored. Moon. Do you know how to rename yourself? I sent you a text just now about it. If you go to the top dots in the top right of the box that your image is in.
I think it's fixed.
If you... Ah, there you are. Do you want to put your whole name though? It's so good. It's such a beautiful name.
It is. It's a gorgeous name.
Whoever can, yeah.
Last
time you taught us, you gave us a little lesson. I welcome that again if you're up for it. So hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Here we are, blessed and happy and grateful to be here. And we've had some really lovely planning and discussions. And yeah, this work doesn't exactly get done right away, does it now? Maybe 100 years? No, less. Equity within reach, inclusion right around the corner. We're going to introduce ourselves again. We're going to start with Chris.
Hi, everybody. Chris Newell, Executive Director of the Abbey Museum, and Senior Partner to the Wabanaki Nations, also for the Abbey, and Passamaquoddy Tribal Citizen. My name is Chris Newell. My nickname is, depending on how you know me, is either Chris or Newell, or in some cases noodles. So there's a few of them. Once again, depending on how you know me. And a place in Maine that has meaning to me, a very specific place to me, is our community in Zibayig, which is our old traditional tribal headquarters, so the mouth of what is now called the St. Croix River, or Scudig in our language, which is the place where we always came during the summer months to set up fishing weirs and harvest the pollock run as it would come through, and get enough food. And even if you visit the community today, you can still see the fishing weirs out in the water, and the beginning of the revival of that tradition once again. So that place is it's where my father grew up, my grandmother grew up. I have a lot of love for that piece of territory.
Thank you. Chris, are you willing to pick who goes next, or does somebody want to volunteer?
I'll pick somebody just going around my Zoom screen. Bridget Matros, you're next.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. My name is Bridget Matros. I'm in Belfast, Maine. And right now I do outreach programs and kids and families stuff for Waterfall Arts, which is also in Belfast in Waldo County. Nickname Bridge Matros. Snap the fingers this way. I'll respond to any of that. My favorite place in Maine is a particular property. It's a farm just outside of Brooks, Maine. If you've ever been on Route 7 between 220 and Brooks, and you look to the left and you go, oh, that's it. It's this beautiful, beautiful farm. It's beautiful. And it's now defunct, so I can't go back there. So it just lives here. But I hope everybody has a place in Maine that is that breathtaking for you.
You want to throw the intro?
Samuel.
Oh, thanks, Bridget. My name is Samuel James. I am a musician and storyteller and writer, journalist for Black Girl in Maine and for Mainer News. I don't really have any nicknames. I guess Sam. We're really lacking in the nickname department, it seems like here. And a place in Maine that is one of my favorites is Indigo Arts Alliance, which is where I am right now. It's I wonder how they describe themselves. I think of them as a Black art collective. And I am the artist in residence here for the rest of the month through Sunday. Yeah, so I'm gonna throw it to Moon.
Thank you, Samuel, and don't worry, I'll get you a nickname. My full name is Nyamoun Nquany Machar. Again, that's Nyamoun, and your tongue reaches the whole roof of your mouth when you begin to pronounce it. So it's Nyamoun Nquany Machar, and it comes from the Newell tribe in South Sudan. And my nickname is Moonski or Moonski. I work as a mental health professional here in Maine, and I also do a lot of advocacy work within the mental health field for disproportionately represented communities with disability rights, where I work as a cultural strategist. I am also a poet. I am a teacher, and I am a lover of the arts. Samuel took one of my favorite spaces, so I am going to go for the scenic route and say Sebago Lake, because it is one of the first lakes I went to when I first moved to America, when I went with a root cellar as a kid, and it was pretty incredible how warm the water was. And so it's always been this nostalgic piece for me. Oh, and coffee by design.
Want to throw it, Moon?
Brigid.
Here we go. Hi, I'm Brigid Rankowski, mixed pronouns, so you can refer me as pretty much anything, and I'll go hi. I do a lot of things. I am the founder of The Way We Move, which is a social circus based in Portland that promotes circus arts for marginalized communities, specifically disabilities, but just hey, everyone likes circus. I'm also a disability advocate who works with Autism Society of Maine, America, Autism Speaks, and various other organizations. And hopefully soon I can add to my resume as Miss Mermaid Maine, because why not? Like, I didn't realize as a child I wanted to grow up to be a queer, non-binary mermaid, but like, yeah, I do. So nicknames, I have a lot. My performance name is Bridget Sinclair. Bridge B, just like the other Bridget, I'll respond to hey you if I think it's directed at me, and my cats just meow at me. So they gave me their own nicknames. And I love Fort Williams in Cape Elizabeth has just a special connection and energy to me. So that's a place where whenever I'm stressed, I like to go there, and no matter the temperature, I'll go in the water because I'm, well, a mermaid.
Wow, thank you, everybody. But in case I forget, before I give mine, I'm going to just mention that part of what we've been talking about among ourselves is about the kind of key role that playing building relationships has to this work. And so there's a phrase that Meg or Martha Piskuskas offered, get to know me before you need me, get to know us before you need us. And we found some problematic, interesting threads in all that, which Moon may or may not get into referencing, but it, as a catchphrase, it's not a bad one. So I feel like the longer introductions, it's like getting to know us is a wonderful place to start if you don't already. So I'm Marty Pottenger, and I am a theater artist and an activist, and have figured out through working with the city of Portland for 8 years, ways in which art can actually tackle problems and issues in culture and municipal government and relationships and communities that have nothing supposedly to do with art, that it really awakens a courage, a clarity, a sense of willingness to take risks and be uncomfortable that is essential to our opportunities ahead. So we're going to start. There you go. We're going to start. My screen still shows. The panelists, does your screen show Meg and Ryan and David? Yeah. Okay, some do and some don't. Okay. Well, they're here and they're here. So there you go. We're going to start out, and some of us are going to do it. Some of us aren't. Everybody will get to decide. But I thought it might actually sow a different kind of seed after the last time we met, to actually invite each of the panelists to ask each other a question that they want. It can be scary to do that, as we all know. It can put you on unfamiliar ground, and it seemed like a good way to both take possibly some risks ourselves, and we don't know what those questions are going to be. I don't think we do. I don't. And be in this together with you. So I did ask Chris to be the first. No, Moon, sorry. I asked Moon to be the first, and I paired folks up, and they may stick to that and they may not, but. So maybe just say, I asked Moon to ask Brigid a question. Of whatever.
So, Brigid, my question for you is, what were some of your favorite ways that you've seen art integrated with either the mental health struggle or the disability struggle, and really be given a platform for that?
Oof. Good question.
Hey, can I interrupt, Brigid? You taught me so much in our conversations. I'm going to ask if somebody on our team, not us, but our back end team, could type the questions into the chat. Great. And if they can turn on closed captioning for Zoom, that would be great as well. And if any of us feel like describing ourselves for people who have visual differences, that's okay too. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
All good. So I think one of the great things about the disability experience is the ability to translate it into some type of artistic presentation. We talk a lot about invisible disabilities versus visible disabilities. And I think the way that we can embody, and whether your medium is clay, songwriting, there's emotions that that's a big question. I think for me, I like to center a lot around the circus arts, as a fire performer, as someone who loves the circus, and the circus encapsulates a lot of who I am. And I think the cool thing about circus arts is that it doesn't have to be verbal. It can be the actions, the movement, the emotions of it. I've seen some really amazing Sins Invalid, which is a disability organization based out in California, does a lot of disability theater work. I think the big thing when it comes to embodying disability in arts is the authentic experiences. It's going to be intense. Like to talk about trauma, to talk about sexual assault, to talk about the pain, the grief. If someone becomes disabled because of an accident, or even the grieving of someone who understands what it's like to be disabled, but disability changes throughout the lifespan. So I think there's always room for improvement in the arts, and the way that we can better have conversations about the arts and disabilities is to involve disabled people as the stakeholders, as the organizers, as the people who are helping to create this content and disseminate it, because without that we end up with autistic or disabled stereotypes in media and art, and that's not always who we are. And that might be a very roundabout way to answer the question, but I think I got somewhere with the monkeys and typewriters. Yeah.
Great. And then you want to take a breath, and then I think you're asking, do you want me to remind you? Or
yeah, I'll toss it to Samuel. So in the rise of the virtual platforms during the COVID era and moving forward, how do you feel that people have been able to be more represented through virtual mediums? Or what is the work that organizations throughout Maine, or even like throughout the United States or worldwide, can do to involve more people, like BIPOC, in this virtual arena, now that some of the other barriers are not there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. Well, I think number one, like the problem is, one of the reasons we're all here, right, is access is always a problem, and access to the internet is a problem. And once you limit a space like this, we're all sort of caught in this little box. Not everybody has access to these boxes. Not everybody is asking. I think, the problems with teaching children have come to the front quite a bit over Zoom. People talk about that a lot. And I think that's something to overcome. I think like broadband, I mean, there's the problem, I think it always almost comes down to, almost every time, is that, there's, I don't want to say this to get too long. You can drive across this country and you can see a lot of abandoned houses, right? I live in a town, I might have said this last time, with the most restaurants per capita in the entire country. And there are dumpsters full of food. It isn't that there's not enough food to go around for hungry people, because you can't walk a block from any of those dumpsters without finding hungry people. You can find homeless people everywhere. It's not that we don't have enough for everybody. It's very clearly that we just have systems designed to say who deserves and who doesn't. It would be very easy for us to put broadband all over and put a laptop in every house and like put childcare everywhere. It would be very easy for us to do it, but we have these systems that we've aligned that say that only certain people deserve certain things, and that wealth is often wealth and race and gender and class are all of these roadblocks we've set up that only give permission to whoever the people in charge want to give permission to. And that can change, and I think we get stuck playing a game where we're sort of appeasing those people in a way and trying to get to a place where we're begging for handouts and sort of fighting each other for the handouts. And I think you can apply the same rules to almost any social issue as you can right now to finding access to the internet, you know, and finding access to arts, to whatever it is. Access is always the problem, and it's almost always the same roadblocks to it, no matter what the issue is. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Marty. I'm going to toss to Bridget, and I'm going to ask you, Bridget, are there times that people have challenged you for the work that you do? I'm going to let you describe the work that you do, in case people don't know.
I'm chronically challenged, Samuel. Well, for example, I'm sure that there are people out there that wondered why I was, you know, they're seeing the poster or whatever, and people that I work with are like, well, what are you on there for? Like, what's your thing? And that makes sense because I'm, you know, representing low-income people. Am I really? Kind of, like I'm a representative, but you're not going to find the person that I'm referring to or the audience that I'm referring to here because they're at work or because they don't care. Those are the two reasons why. You need somebody else like me who has slid into this weird position. And the way that I got into this position is that I'm from a low-income family, a family of artists, ironically, that was not, you know, we were never going to go to the theater, go to the whatever. That was just not our socioeconomic status. That wasn't our thing. But I got dumped into a really great liberal arts school, Oberlin, where full scholarship, where you're not allowed to graduate until you have been ripped apart and rebuilt into a slightly more woke person. So I have all of the cultural collateral, right, to have these conversations. But at the same time, I'm uniquely aware, someone said the other day, of the perspective of low-income people who are not of this world in a natural, you know, came into this world taking lessons, classes, going to shows and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody else here can authentically embody and take questions as the other, right, that we're trying to talk about access to. Whereas I'm more of like a spokesperson, if you will. So by all means, check my credibility. I will say that my snazzy jacket that I'm wearing did cost me $3. So don't be fooled. I'm not a wealthy person remembering what it was like to be of lower socioeconomic status, but I'm a teacher, so you know that I'm not making a lot of money. My friends and family and my networks are all low-income people that are really scratching their heads about the arts scene and why we're trying to sell our product to them so hard. So good one. Thank you, Sam. Chris, can I ask you something?
Absolutely.
I'm an art teacher. As an art teacher among art teachers, trying to be wiser in our approaches to sharing cultural arts and crafts, particularly elementary school teachers are often without the educational background to be able to do so as elegantly as we'd like. And so then there becomes this fear of appropriation, and then we just drop anything that makes any reference to any cultures. What would you say to art teachers out there that really want to incorporate First Nations Native art into what we're doing? How can we connect with something more specific than Native American art? What advice do you have?
That's such an awesome question, Bridget, because that's something that I'm sure a lot of people that work in arts education are probably, have in the back of their minds as well, because I run into this a lot. I've been working with, all areas of education, whether it's K through 12 schools, colleges, universities, as well as museums. And one of the things that I run into with, any professional development I do with teachers, and this really applies very strongly to the arts, is the paralyzation that non-native teachers have, that they feel about trying to approach these topics, because there's such bad material out there, and it's existed for decades, and to the point where they were raised with it. And so therefore it's hard, for them to, kind of parse out what are good resources and what are not. And what my biggest advice to you is that, yes, we got to go beyond the term Native American, number one, because that is, we are none of those things. These terms Native American, American Indian, and even Native with a capital N, which is what's in vogue these days. We are none of those things. I mean, the most popular question when I do these things is which one is right? And I tend to break people's hearts when I say none of them, because I'm Passamaquoddy. We are part of a larger group collectively of peoples with a common cosmology known as Wabanaki peoples. So if you're going to teach about our arts, you can't teach Native American arts. We're just not that. We're Passamaquoddy, we're Wabanaki. So one of the things that I do work at is I do understand that paralyzation. I do understand that fear. I do know where it comes from, because this is multi-generational, and this type of erasure, began all the way back in the 1870s and has been present in our public school system ever since. So even their grandparents couldn't give them better advice on how to do this. So it's really about, challenging yourself to break down your colonized mindset and the English language mindset that you have about art, and to stop thinking in English. That's a hard thing to do. I mean, except for people that speak more than one language, but for people that do speak multiple languages, you do understand that your worldview, communicates differently through different languages. And when we're talking about the native arts, when we use the English language, understand that that's going to leave out a lot of context, because we're using the worldview of England, to describe the world of arts. But there are ways that, today in 2021, arts educators, non-native arts educators can engage their students to learn about it, even in the English language. And I just went over, I had a great professional development on two-dimensional art with the Portland Public School System, which the Abbey Museum works with. And, to teach them, what is appropriation, what is appreciation, and really appropriation is about, not having permission, if you're making dream catchers, dream catchers, come from the Anishinaabe peoples. If an Anishinaabe teacher, did not give you the knowledge that goes with proper usage and all of that type of stuff, and you're just making them as a craft, as Native American art, you have not gone through a process of getting permission and getting proper knowledge. Therefore, it is an appropriation, and you got to be real about that. But there are things that exist in our art world, and one of them is the double curve motif that Wabanaki peoples. It starts all the way up in the St. Lawrence River, but was absorbed by all different Wabanaki peoples. And you can teach the history of the double curve motif. There's a lot of historical documentation of it, and the differences between the tribes, and then use the concept of the double curve motif, which is really about telling a story through things, abstracts like spirals and lines and curves, for students to then create their own symmetrical, double curve, storytelling device, and they can use color, they can use yarn on paper, there's so many ways to express that for the students. And in that way, they are not copying or appropriating Wabanaki double curve art. They're not using somebody else's created art, which was some of these were made for funerals and things like that. It's important to not copy. The students are creating something that is of themselves, a reflection of themselves, using the mindset of how the double curve motif art is used. And so that's one of the ways that you can appreciate and learn the history, our histories and cultures. Learning about the histories by learning about, the motif, and then incorporating the fundamentals of it in creation of a new piece of art for your students. So, there's a lot of challenge there for sure, but that's one of the ways that can be done.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I thought that was pretty good. I appreciate everyone participating in what I know did feel a bit nerve-wracking on all sides. Chris, you technically may have a question that you wanted to ask somebody. If it's something you'd like to do, then the door's open. If not, then I thought we might swing into these kind of primary respondent thing. What do you want?
I do have one question for you, Marty. I mean, it's really.
Oh, I knew it!
Yeah.
I knew it!
And really, it segues off of what we were just talking about, and it's really something everybody here could probably, have might have words to answer to this as well. But to move the conversation along, I'll just ask it to you for now. But anyone else, feel free to weigh in. And that goes into that fear that non-native educators have, and the lack of good resources and the bad teaching that they've gotten over the years. And I wonder, with the last year celebrating 200 years of the existence of the state of Maine. How difficult is it for you as a non-native artist working in the borders in Wabanaki homelands to see beyond the overlay of colonization, the deforestation, the damming of rivers, and all of those types of things, the homes and buildings that have been built, the roads? How difficult it is for you to see beyond that overlay, to see the indigenous landscape that still exists there?
I mean, I think for me, just personally, it's a very personal question, Chris, and that's been a part of just me as a person, has been actually staying aware of that and being aware of it in some way, more so now than ever, with Indigenous and non-Indigenous colleagues and friends, right, pointing it out to me and reminding me, and wherever I am. But here, part of that is building relationships within the Wabanaki community, and feeling whatever fear I get to feel about not knowing what to do, and about doing it wrong, and about showing racism, my racism. That's all happened. Being challenged on it, being, called out on it publicly and privately. And it's a kind of rocky gift, I guess, for me, right?
Yeah.
I can't genuinely be here on this land with that level of confusion and ignorance and not seeing where I really am. So for me, just personally, it's more integrated than it ever has been, and much to go. And there's a grief and an acknowledgement and a not just a grief, but a gratefulness that for at least here in Maine, the Wabanaki people have been here, have remained for 13,000 years. And that's something I think we're all, all of us who have had a chance to think about it or make friends in that community or learn more, that's something to be treasured.
Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability, especially because I think that's so important for anyone in working in the Maine art landscape to see that even at the people that we see as leaders are still struggling with this, and there is help. The Abbey Museum is part of that. The communities are doing outreach work, but there's also work that needs to be done on the other side, and that meeting in the middle is a beautiful place. And the journey is a difficult one at times, but it also leads to a better place for us all. It really does. So thank you for really showing that to us.
Thanks, and thanks for dragging me into this, Chris. It's only fair, and I know it's a fair play. It's a fair play culture. So, everyone, I've asked each of you. We've had these other conversations. They're brilliant. They're amazing. They're just beginning. Many of them, in that we're beginning with each other. But I believe, Chris, actually, I have you as first, unless somebody else wants to jump in. And you can expand, Chris. I would say 3 minutes each, if you can, out of your like 4 hours of brilliance, right? But something that you know or see or understand, Chris, from your experience as a Passamaquoddy, that most of us don't.
Would you mind if I just interrupted really quickly?
Yeah, please.
I didn't, did anybody ask Moon a question?
Ha! Bridget to Samuel.
Yeah. It was Moon to Bridget, Bridget to me to Bridget, Bridget to Chris to Christine. I think we left out Moon.
Anybody. I said Samuel to Bridget. Yeah. So what's your question, Samuel?
I think in the end, nobody asked Moon a question. I think she started.
Oh, Moon. I thought you said me.
No.
Hi, Moon.
I got to talk.
Hi, Moon. This is what happens. Moon to Bridget. Moon, pick one of us to ask you a question. Would you?
I'm gonna go with Chris, and I would love it to involve more of the tribal representation and what that, if we could dribble a little bit of that in there.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of names in the state of Maine that actually have, place names that actually have they're anglicized versions of Wabanaki terminology. Aroostook is a great example. It's an anglicized version of Willistic, which is the name of the river, what's known as the St. John River now. So once again, this goes in, to, are there any terms that you've ever wondered about, the Androscoggin River, the Kentuskeg, and have you ever, decided to, dig into those terms a little bit more to see if you can discover where they come from? Once again, it's a window to opening to the indigenous landscape.
Sure, I'm actually I'm very good friends with a chief called Wampa Miweg. And so I've been so curious about, how, because we also have very different names. And so I've always, I think one of my biggest curiosities is not necessarily about the names of the landscapes, but how each individual receives their names. Because in my tribe, my name has something to do with the time of my birth. And so each newer girl that you meet, her name starts with NYA, which is the Nya, which means daughter of a time. And so mine, it's rich soil. The soil was very rich to my dad. My sister's name is name of troubled times, and he wrote because my dad lost a brother during the war that was going on. And so I know for sure each time that I hear some of these and I see some of the terms, it definitely strikes my curiosity to what that means either to that land or to that individual.
Yeah, and that's really, you're hitting on something so real, because when it comes to Wabanaki peoples and our language and our culture and everything, it's relational. Algonquin as a language base is a relational language, and our names for each other are usually in how we relate to one another or how we relate to the land itself. So Passamaquoddy comes from Beskudamugadi, which means the people who spear pollock, and that place I was talking about, Zibayeg, would if you can include the other side of the river and the water, is Beskudamagadig, You know, if you add that K on the end there, it becomes the place of the that we spear Pollock. You know, so it's very, very rich, you know, the naming that we do, and especially amongst one another. You know, there's oftentimes a lot of paying attention to our ancestry, and you know, where we come from, and a lot of people are you know, we took on the English language naming culture of you know, last surnames and all of that, beginning all the way back in the 1800s, but we're starting to see a resurgence of traditional naming, once again describing the relational aspect of a child as they're born, you know, to the others and the land around them. It's a beautiful thing.
Wow.
And Samuel, if I could say, naturally and expectedly, thanks for having my back.
Yes, Samuel, thanks for having my back too. Not the kind of thing you want to find out when it's over, right? And to not get to hear from Moon, that's a pretty big loss. Hey Moon, in light of, would you be up for going next in terms of your question for our time? And again, trying to think about 3 minutes each so we get to questions and answers from
Sure.
the folks here with us. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. I guess I'll just touch on just the phrase that you're talking about get to know us before you need us. And, you know, and when we talked about how I completely understand how to Chris and the people who have already been here, it's very, it's very, very real. And it sits in the heart in kind of a different way, where with me, and I've had a conversation now with many people in my community, it triggered a lot for the motivation of getting to know me, having to do with the need that you have of me, but not just a general relation or relationship building that I would want to expect, because I don't think that I should have to bring some sort of currency, whether it be a cultural currency, an economic currency, or any sort of currency to be worthy of being known, or be worthy of having someone invest the time and the space the energy into getting to understand who I am and how I see the world, especially being in Maine, in one of the whitest states in the entire country. So much of the education, so much of the culture is already started the framework of getting to know the community here. And so with nothing of a need that is given on the other side, but with myself, it would feel that way. And I think you told me to think about phrases in my own country. One of my favorite proverbs that my mom used to always say whenever me and my brothers and sisters would quarrel is that the bare-butt baboon laughs at the baboon when he's behind another baboon. And so when you see, you know, we all have a little bit, they're all things, you know, that we have that are so common. But when you see somebody else's, it's funny to point, you know, and to look at it. And so I think it's really, really important that there needs to be an equal, you know what I mean? Like more of that relational piece that's more eye to eye, rather than let me look down and get to know you and bring you back up here. But just a general respect and a genuine intention of getting to know me for the sake of having interest and for the sake of wanting me to enrich your life or your space, and vice versa, you know, and give me that option also. So I think for me, in many Black communities or many disproportionate communities, when you say need, it could trigger different things.
Thank you. Thank you, Moon. Hey, Bridget, it's a little out of order, Bridget Matros, but would you be up for going next?
Sure. So 3 minutes.
Feel free.
All right. So I think that last time we touched a little bit on, I was talking about organizations trying to sell their product, our product, the arts, to an audience that maybe doesn't want it, but feeling really strongly like, no, but it's the arts and you should have it. And that's, you know, a little bit paternalistic, a little bit patronizing, but we all know, because we're here, that the arts, whatever it means to people, obviously does have value. And so I think a lot of organizations, including mine, have to sort of let go of the product as we currently offer it and go back to our mission statements, and figure out how to provide what's at the heart of what we do to everyone equally. And so, and in my experience up here, an example of this was, round one of being inclusive to low-income people is the organization says, cost is the issue. Free tickets for everybody, boom, 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 boom. And still they don't come. Okay, transportation must be the issue. We'll send a bus out to y'all. And Maine Arts Commission has a great program where you actually can get a free bus to take your kids to an art museum. Nobody's interested, nobody's taken. I think the issue that so many of our organizations can address is creating that audience so that 10 years from now, people will take whatever money they have and they'll prioritize the arts, coming out to see a show, saving up for an instrument. And so the way that I've gone about that is through early intervention. And I just encourage everybody to think about how your organization can reach out to lower socioeconomic members of your community, and in whatever way they need or want, infuse art into their lives, so that then you have the next generation in your community growing up expecting access to the arts. But for now, passing out those free tickets, dial it back. It's not really helping. So what I had to do is not only tweak the product. People don't want to come down to our galleries outside of a school situation. I'm not going to get their parents to come down and take a class in printmaking or whatever. So you figure, well, a free art program would be great, right? I'll go out to the school and I'll do it. I can only knock on the door of a school so many times, send so many emails and get no answer before I have to say, I got to let go of this and do something different. So now what I do is I go through Head Start programs, and I offer the families an art night. And originally I called this Every Child is an Artist, but that didn't work. Go through so many iterations, and now what I do is we call it Free Art Night, and there's pizza. Okay, people show up, and we have a little trick where we send the kids off to have childcare for the first 15 minutes. And I trap the parents and I give them a crash course, all sneaky like. I give them a crash course in my product of value for them, which is arts education as survival skill. I say, look, our kids are not on the even playing field that the other kids in this school are. Critical thinking, problem solving, flexibility, thinking outside of the box, perseverance, all these things are things that come from art education. Let's get everybody on the even playing field. I'm going to show you 10 things to do with your kids at home, and we're going to practice it here. And then we move over and we all do art together. So now what I'm doing is creating dozens and dozens of advocates. These parents are on board so that 10 years from now, hopefully these art organizations all over Maine are still going to be vibrant and existing, but they'll actually have people seeking out their programs. Will they still need cheap and free tickets? Yeah, probably, but at least there'll be an audience. So produce your audience, do whatever you need to do to create the audience through early intervention. That's my unsolicited advice, perhaps solicited.
Sorry, very solicited, and more to come, hopefully. Bridget, Chris, Samuel, who'd like to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
So I have to put this in a little time window. I'm going to talk about language around disability. And when we're talking about programming, outreach, how is the language representative of the communities that we're seeking to engage? So as someone who's disabled is not a bad word. Like, it's okay to say disabled. When you try to create advertising or beat around the bush, using terms like differently abled, like special able, like I've heard some really out there ones over time, like the number of words between a person and their condition sometimes is how far removed we feel from being a part of the planning committee. So when we talk about the disability community, the term person first language comes like it's standard because of the way that social workers were taught and the way that the language was originally created. So it was the caregivers, the professionals talking about us. So it's a person with autism. But like, would you really like, would you say like a person with Irish descent? Or like, look at our panel here. Like, do you really want to say a person with like anything? Like, you can call me a person with whiteness. Like that is a thing that I do suffer from. But when it comes to how to better engage in the communities, we have to talk about identity first language. So the deaf culture, the autistic culture, we want to be the stakeholders. And when we're talking about creating these programs for kids and adults with disabilities, or disabled kids and adults, like we have to think about what is the message that we're wanting to send. If your media team, if your board, if your employees are afraid to say the word disabled, what is that message being sent to the disabled people who are coming? Is it making them feel welcome? Is it making them feel respected? So I think one of the big things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the language choices, especially in today's day and age, is the self-advocacy movement for people with disabilities has changed so much since the 1980s that we are now able to do this stuff and able to not just be stakeholders, but we're able to organize it. And I know for me, being disabled, yes, there are absolutely some shortcomings. And that's why I normally have a team to help me organize like the nonprofit status. And then COVID happened. And it also involves like being mindful of the fact that disabled people are not less. It's just a different way of thinking and a different way of needing to operate in the world. So I think it's really important when people are looking at, again, what are the programs, who are the stakeholders, and what is their preferred language choice. I think Chris was talking a great deal about that too. And I think it's important that if you're going to be working with a community, you have to meet the community at their language choices and not try to impose yours because that's the right way or that's the way it's been done before, because that's the most dangerous phrase of, well, we've always done this before. Well, maybe no one complained about it before, or maybe you weren't listening when they had issues before. So yeah, that's my little spiel on disabled is not a bad word.
Thank you. And someday, I think just because of time, Bridget, I know I mentioned you helping us understand what universal, what is it? Design, universal design. But everybody listening, I just encourage you to go and look that one up. Universal design. A nice way to spend some time. Samuel or Chris, do either of you have a preference? Samuel? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so my question was about how to create more welcoming, diverse, inclusive spaces without tokenism. And so last time we had this panel, I brought up the photos. There was, in case you didn't watch the advertising for the previous panel, It was a day of panels, and it had photographs representing a lot of the speakers, but it didn't have any photographs representing any of the Black speakers. And I sort of made this point that like Ashley Bryan was there, and I'm there, and Moon was there. There were people of color, and our photos are very easy to find. And this has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with deliberate intent, you know, of just like at no point did I think anybody was just like, we ain't gonna put the Black folks on this one. Like, I don't think that's what you're doing, but there's no intent to do that, right? And the sort of status quo is you just sort of move how it is, and you're trying your best within your own window to see what the best path forward is. But your window is small, right? Our windows are all small, and they're all our own. And so, you know, after our meeting about this a couple of days ago, a post went up on Instagram, and it was about it was a poster for this panel, and we were all included in it. But a problem was that Bridget, Chris, and Marty, your photos were all very professional headshots. And the photos that were chosen for Moon and I, we were in tank tops. And there were sort of arts photos that really focused on our bare arms. And I think the message, I think a message that can be taken from that is that certain people are here to be listened to and taken seriously, and certain people are here to be looked at. I think Moon's photo was the only one that wasn't even in color. And again, I don't think anybody was like...
I think yours was black and white too, Samuel.
Yeah. And so you know, it sends a different message that is not as inclusive as I think the intention is. And I think you get around that by just having leadership that looks like Moon and I. Because I think there's an uneven thing, right? The uneven thing is that, without going all the way back in history, is that like Black people, we have our own history in this country, and we know it. And we know it growing up, and just as Native people do, right? And just as each subsection has their own history. And the problem is that we also learn white history along the way, but white people don't learn our histories. So we understand your representation, and you don't necessarily understand ours. And so I think you know, having leadership that is not white, I think is very important. And I also think that I think politicians are leaders, right? And politicians fall into this problem all the time, where people like they run for office, and then the first thing that happens is people are like they're mad at them, right? And without getting too crass, like the politician's main job is to eat shit. And like, that's your job if you're a leader, no matter what you are, is to eat shit. And so like, accept that as part of your job. And I think, and you know, obviously, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody who can't do that, but I think things get a lot easier when you realize that you are not, like, there's not just like, well, we'll just put the photos of them in and now the problem is fixed, right? There's nuance to it, just as there is to everybody else's experiences. If that makes sense.
That's brilliant and needed and appreciated. Thank you again, Samuel. Maybe we got to do
playing the same note every time.
I know, but there it is again. And another brilliant point about it, right? And it makes me, obviously, the ignorance, never mind the intentionality of racism, but just the ignorance and is just layered in every direction. And I think for Brigid, in terms of disabled and able-bodied, and right, and for economic targeting of low-income people, Brigid said to me, it's called the Poor People's Campaign. There's nothing wrong with calling it the Poor People's Campaign, right? It's not a bad word. And what Moon has shared, and Chris, it just shows up in language. It shows up in how everything gets set up. So it reminds me, one of the points we were going to offer everyone here was just that this is everything you do in the direction of dismantling any of these oppressions, sexism, LGBT oppression, it all makes a difference. We may not see, it may be generations before you see something being built that looks as different as we want it to, but it all makes a difference. And that it takes that kind of persistence and just a decision. Chris.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to reiterate Sam's point that, you know, the small things make a difference, especially in these types of conversations. You know, it maybe no bad intent was involved, but somebody's going to notice, and that representation is going to echo with them. And you know, we're all human beings, we're all imperfect, and you know, it really shows that, you know, when it comes to the panel we have assembled here, none of us are experts at this. We're all just very much committed to engaging the process and continuing to learn and knowing that we don't know it all. And, you know, Samuel pointing out, you know, that detail right there is, you know, actually extremely important, because it happens in Indian country all the time with those nuances being missed and, you know, having to explain them as part of the presentation. So, I mean, you know, I appreciate that he brings that to the conversation and doesn't let it go silent. That's much respect to you, Samuel. So my question for me is, you know, what's something you know or see or understand from your experiences with Passamaquoddy that most others probably don't? You know, there's once again, there's a fear with the non-native education world about engaging with, you know, Wabanaki education, and part of it is largely due to the amount of erasure that has gone on. And as a Passamaquoddy educator, one of the things I try to point out is that the weight of undoing that erasure should not fall upon the Native communities ourselves, because we did not cause that. You know, we're glad to help, and I'm going to, you know, make you aware of some of the efforts that have been going on for, you know, multiple decades of easy access points where we have been working with very limited resources to educate the public that have just not been taken advantage of. And you know, that's something that, you know, I think the you know, the rest of the world needs to see, that even with you know, the effects of colonization, the erasure that happened, we have always wanted to, you know, educate our neighbors here in the state of Maine, and that's the way we look at it. You know, we're all here now, right? And it's all about, you know, sustaining this land that we call the state of Maine together now, so that we're here the next 200, 400 years from now, and we're doing this all right. You know, so Native communities have for years, you know, starting as far back as the early 20th century, you know, the Passamaquoddy communities, Penobscot communities started having events open to the public. You know, they began in Zibayag as what were called Corpus Christi days, because they were essentially assembled by the church, the Catholic Church. But it was a way for, you know, a public event to teach about, you know, from Passamaquoddies about ourselves, about all aspects of our culture, not just our historical culture, but the living culture that existed at the time. And some of those included marching bands and things like that, you know, and exhibiting all of our arts that way. And it was a way to draw crowds to the communities so that our artists could sell their art, you know. And so, you know, those entry points are so valuable, but you have to make the effort to go to the communities, because once again, you know, our communities up until the 70s, we weren't even federally recognized. We were considered wards of the state. We were legally considered imbeciles by a legal decision back in the 19th century. You know, so with those very, very limited resources, getting those teachings out to the world is a difficult thing. And even in modern day times, it's still a difficult thing for us. But now we have resources like the changes that have happened at the Abbey. So the Abbey Museum, Indian Market, and the Native American Festival are great touch points to come in and talk to Native artists themselves and talk about their life experiences and how they grew up and how they came into their art. You know, and you get to meet artists not just in traditional arts, but in contemporary arts. So there are touch points where you, if you want to engage and get over your fear yourself, that are already available and have been available from the communities, and now with the support of the Abbey Museum museum as well. And I would encourage people, even if you're not going to buy things, to just come and visit and experience, those educational opportunities and talk to the artists and get to know them, because there's so many amazing stories to tell. And that's one of the things that I, as a Passamaquoddy educator, I see it there. I know it exists, but not enough people take advantage of it or seem to know about it. And I want people to know that when we hold those events, Passamaquoddy Ceremonial Days, Penobscot Indian Days, those are open to the public. We're inviting the public into our communities, for you to come and learn from us in a first-person perspective. So.
Wow, Chris, thank you. Thank you. I'm thinking about the time we spent, and we're a little over time in terms of the questions, going to questions and answers from you all who are here with us. But I didn't want to make that shift without asking Moon, and she said she would be willing to share some of her thoughts. Her work, she has a very, as do many of us, but she has a very profound relationship to each of the identities that we're all bringing here, that the rest of us are here with. And so I just thought it'd be lovely as we go to switch to questions and answers that Meg will help us with, to ask Moon to share some thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think that being a person, being a Black woman, there's so much. Like I feel, and any Black woman, a lot of Black women, a majority of Black women would be able to go across the board and understand a lot of the oppressions that you're talking about. So it's not even anything that's so specific to me. And for so many times when I get passionate, when I get agitated, I have to think about how to maneuver that space in order for me not to be stereotyped as a person who can't handle my emotions, or being the angry Black woman, and so I have to, there's this constant check in my tone, or if I want to represent my art in a certain way, which is why for me, I took on poetry to be able to cuss out the audience through art sometimes, and I think that that's something that became very special. And I love to find theaters to be able to do that, not only share about what's going on where I'm from, but also to be able to speak towards the day-to-day walks. I think each one of the speakers talked about what you're forced to have to know that others don't know about you. When Bridget brought up, the issue with the design of a building, that she was forced to have to maneuver, but that entity was not forced to consider her, when Samuel had to speak about, just the representation of our bodies, you know what I mean? Being sometimes sexualized when we don't intend them to, or we're not asking for them to. And I say that in a way because I'm also very, very in touch with my sensuality, my sexuality, my femininity. But I'm also, as a professional and as a person who is very, very aware and alert to being a representation of the oppression that my community faces, specifically in the mental health and the disability field, and the ways the systems interact with us. I think that it becomes, and when I do a lot of these panels, I'm sitting and I'm listening to bits and chips of another version or another person's sense. And sometimes I sit and I think about, there are certain oppressions that you could walk out of. Okay, you could make money and not be poor anymore. Bridget talked about the disabilities that are not shown. You're able to mask them. Chris being understanding and recognizing and being able to be white passing. I myself can never take off my skin. And so it's not just a piece that I am sitting on panels discussing. This is an everyday occurrence. And so when I talk to you about sharing my thoughts, I'm literally I could give you a summary of my day. That could be an advocacy piece to try to open your eyes to what I'm going through, or the oppressions that I'm dealing with. Because I love this community. I love the Maine community. I can very much consider myself an African Mainer. Is how I kind of joke around about who I am, because both identities put so much into who I am. You know, I can go anywhere in the United States when I used to travel for the military. And there were things that I knew when I described myself in this way, placed me right here in Maine, and very uniquely placed me here. But I also knew that because of my name and the way it was spelled out, even within the African-American community, there was something that placed me in this other place that I have to be an ambassador of. And so everywhere that I go, I'm constantly, as an artist, as a professional, I have no choice but to be an ambassador for the people that I represent. Even if I'm not in the mood in that day, maybe I do just want to be a bitch, or just I'm going through something and want to be an angry Black woman. I just don't have that luxury to be able to do that, because I know that there are so many younger people, there's so many others in my community. They're sometimes dependent on me being in spaces and on panels like this and being able to articulate what we're feeling. And so there's this double burden of not only being an artist, not only being a professional, but for always being a person of color.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Well, we're still going to have a second to say goodbye at the end, but just in case time gets a little rushed with all these questions coming up, just thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you. Nice to be vulnerable. Nice to be smart. Nice to be together with you. Hi, Meg.
Hello, everybody. So I wanted to, encourage people to put their questions in the Q&A box. There's been a lot going on in the chat box, so if you did put a question there, if you don't mind plopping it into the Q&A box, that would be fantastic. As people start typing, since we have a minute here while there's not something right in the Q&A box, could I ask Brigid to tell us a little bit more about universal design? I did put a link in the chat box, but I would love to hear more about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. The long and short of it is universal design is a concept that started around architecture, where what is going to be beneficial for one group is going to be beneficial for everyone, even outside of the group. So a really easy way to think about this would be curb ramps. So curb ramps were originally created to help like builders and construction workers be able to move heavy gear up without having to like physically lift it up. And it's also good for people who use mobility aids or wheelchair users. So now it's just commonplace. Well, except for in the old port, but that's because it's the old port. But now it's just in like, hey, if you're gonna build a ramp, if you're gonna build a sidewalk or a curb anywhere, it's gonna have a curb ramp. We can incorporate some of the universal design for learning in some of our art programs and buildings, such as having ramps getting in and out, making sure that there are handrails. We can also do that by, as I had brought up to Marty earlier, captions. I am someone who does not technically have any hearing issues, and I always watch TV and movies with captions on. Like my other friends, they can turn them off, but for me, it really helps. So universal design, when we look at it from an art perspective, like whenever I teach after school art classes and stuff, like instead of having kids maybe cut up individual size pieces of things, well, okay, let's have them pre-cut for everyone. If we're going to be doing a physical activity, giving people the option of doing the activity while standing, while sitting. In some cases, you can do it while laying down. It doesn't mean that you're changing the structure of it or you're changing the goal of it. You're just making it so that you're normalizing that people are going to have different needs, and just kind of, again, normalizing the fact that, hey, we'll all still get there in the end. Let's just help each other out along the way, because everyone's going to walk at a different pace, and everyone needs different things.
sorry, my screen just did a funny thing. Thank you, Bridget. So we do have one question here in the Q&A box, and I apologize. I am probably going to get some of this pronunciation incorrect, but here we go. So this is from Susan Bickford, and she asked, so I was trained in shamanic ways by two shaman, one of whom is Penobscot. When I hold any gathering, I begin with the reading of the, is it Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, translated from Mohawk into English, as a way to begin to enter the same mind as the Wabanaki people on whose land I practice. So she's been doing this for a while, and she's wondering if this kind of thing is okay. And I guess we could sort of generalize this question too of ways to learn about. And Chris, you did address this in terms of art making and symbols and things like that. But yeah, I think a lot of people are now starting to ask these sorts of questions and recognizing things they're doing in their work or their practices, and starting to do research and wonder if it's appropriate and things like that. So Chris, if you do have something that you'd like to add to that.
Sure. I mean, there's, once again, one of the things that we're running into here with this particular question is that we're speaking in the English language. So the term was used shaman, which really originates with Asian cultures and is not really, present, within medicine ways, but is a term that's commonly used in English language for Medela or, people that use magic or, for healing. So, that's one of the issues that we just ran into right there, is that when people hear that word shaman, it automatically drums up certain imagery of, what that practice is or what's going on there, what I would encourage the person who asked the question is, try to evolve a little bit beyond that language to, you learn traditional knowledge from Penobscot and Mohawk teachers, the incorporation of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, though, and everything you do, I think is a beautiful thing. It does not necessarily, transcribe Wabanaki values, because historically the Haudenosaunee and Wabanaki peoples are historic enemies. However, in the 1700s, our differences between the Mohawks were settled by the Odawa, and we began a series of what they call Great Council Fires, which involved wampum protocols and representatives from all the Wabanaki tribes meeting in Ganawagi every 3 years, and meeting with the members of the Haudenosaunee communities as well, including the Mohawk. So there's ever since then we've lived in peace with one another. So it's but the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address actually predates that particular instance. So there's a lot of things that we do share in comparison, though. We are woodland peoples. We do share within our cultural values the idea that we live as part of the natural landscape. We don't live in dominion over it. And those are some of the real good values that I think can be pulled from that address. And once again, it's the English language version. So I think, it's always a common thing to just refer that if you were able to understand it in Mohawk, you would get a different understanding, a little bit deeper understanding of it. And some of it gets lost in the translation. So I would just make people aware of that as well. But I would not discourage the practice of using that. The Haudenosaunee have put that Thanksgiving address out in the English language to the public for people to learn from. And, it's one of those tools, that, once the communities put it out, then that essence of permission has been given, essentially. And so you are not appropriating, then you're really appreciating and using it in a respectful way. So that's my notes for, helping along the process, and hopefully, maybe, increasing the impact of your programming.
Thank you, Chris. So I guess I would say in this time period, is there any of our panelists have anything extra they'd like to share or questions they want to ask other panelists? Bridget?
I have a question. I feel like a lot of people might be coming away from this going, this is great, but I need help. And there's that that uncomfortable position of people feeling like Moon was saying, of having the more than full-time job of always being representative of whatever, and the burden that that is. I'm a white lady of privilege and I need advice. Would you rather somebody come to you, and I'm asking everybody here, would you rather somebody like me come to you and say, look, is it cool to say this? Or is it cool to say that? Or would you rather I Google it? Because I think people are going to come away from this feeling a little bit like, oh my God, I'm doing everything wrong. You know, I got called out on all the things I do wrong. And, you know, that kind of paralysis of like, how do I correct myself? But right now, there's not, I mean, for instance, Chris, you're talking about being able to do better for art teachers, but those resources aren't there yet. So is it more of a burden for people to come to you, or would you rather play that role?
That's such a great question, because my whole life journey has been about this. Because when I first left the reservation and went to Dartmouth College, I realized that nobody, not even other Native peoples, had heard about Passamaquoddies. And their only reference back in the 90s to the word Passamaquoddy was the original Pete's Dragon movie, because that's the name of the town. And that's what I constantly heard. So I was constantly having to educate everybody, every new person I met, about myself, who I was, and get them beyond the Disney movie. And at first, you know, when I started to do that, I really, you know, developed a chip on my shoulder about it. I'm like, man, everybody's so ignorant, and I'm so tired of constantly having to do this. And it did affect my self-esteem. It did, you know, a lot of things. But I found healing once I returned back to my culture and really turning to music. And, you know, through that healing process, what I found out is that, you know, through education, which is something my father has put 50 years of his life into, he was born legally blind, so he couldn't hunt and fish the way his peers could. And so education was his way forward to really making an impact on the world. And so I turned to that as a way of healing for myself and made a career out of it. You know, so now at this point in my life, I'm more than willing to be the access point for people to ask, you know, what might seem like dumb or simple questions at times, but I know that they have them in them because they just have not been taught better, right? I'm willing to be that access point because, you know, I see the benefit of what happens. Not only does the light, you know, lighten up in their eyes, all the people that they affect around them for the rest of their life, they're going to light their eyes up as well. So there's a, you know, there's an effect that goes to it that I see. And I always tell people that you have to be patient in this work. You know, America has done such a good job of erasure that, you know, I probably won't live to see, you know, my full goals in this work. It's, you know, it took multiple generations for us to get here. It's going to take multiple generations to really undo it all. But that does not mean I don't engage in the work, because I love those moments where I have changed somebody's view, where they've, you know, walked into the museum with one idea about who we are and where we come from based on what pop culture and, you know, all the bad resources have been taught them. They come and have our experience and leave there with the, you know, this, you know, no more thinking that Native people are all dead and gone. They're in fact living Native communities. They're vibrant. The languages are there, and there's so much to learn from, you know, that can be, you know, reinserted into the language of America to, you know, create sustainability. So for me, at this point in my life, you know, once again, I was angry about it as a young person just because I was forced into it, and I wasn't making any money at it either. So that was another issue. But when I turned it into a career, I really found healing in it, and that's what really drives me.
I'd love to hear from Moon and Samuel as well if they want to say anything, but I want to do a time check with Meg now.
Yeah, I would love to give everyone a chance that wants to speak on this. So I think this is, you know, a big one for people. So yeah, continue on, and yeah, we're not in the midst of a conference this time, so you know we don't have another session pounding on the door. So yeah, no, continue on.
Would anyone like to offer their thoughts? Hey, Samuel.
Yeah, I think it's important to, I think when trying to navigate those questions, it's important to understand that there are oftentimes ramifications for answering those things honestly, you know. like there is a chance, right? Like there was a chance that the last time we had one of these, and I'm like, yo, I messed up the pictures, and there's a chance that all of a sudden my screen's black. And where did Samuel James go, right? Like obviously that's not what's going to happen here, but that is a risk that you run in answering those questions honestly. I remember a while ago reading an article in the paper it had the point of view of a landlord in Lewiston who was a Trump supporter. And he had asked all of these Somali people who lived with him, who lived under him, right? Who lived in his building. You guys like Trump, right? And so like, do you get kicked out of your home for answering that honestly? Or do you say whatever you say? And so in this article, like this man was saying, all the Somali people who live in my building love Trump. It's like, well, I don't know if that's true, but I know that there's a price for answering that honestly if you ask it. And I know that's a loaded question a lot of times. And so I think, there are people like Chris, right? Like Chris is the perfect example, right? Chris is here. He's running a museum. He's here to answer your questions, right? Like that, like he's putting himself on the line to do it. And I think as long as you recognize that there is that line that people are putting themselves on to answer it, it can guide you to the right people that will answer those questions. Does that make sense? I keep entering everything by saying if that makes sense, because it makes sense in my mind, but I'm not used to talking to people because of COVID.
Well, you're used to writing incredible articles in the Mainer. That's at least what, once a month?
Yeah, those are also monologues though. Nobody's talking.
Well, they're powerful, and I wanted to make mention of them before everybody got off this webinar. It's Mainer.com, and you can be a Patreon subscriber or whatever else, but Samuel has a regular column. That's amazing. Moon, just a small thing. I think it's also, I think, because one of my favorite phrases is humble curiosity. It's okay to be humble. We're curious beings, and there are repercussions for the ways that we answer. So depending on the environment, the condition, it might alter. I know that in a lot of immigrant communities, there's such fear of immigration, of fitting in, of trying to assimilate. So those questions are not going to be answered in the same way. And then when you go to different members of the community, if you ask my father, who is a child soldier, who is deeply melanated, some certain questions, he's not going to respond to it within the guise of the conditioned, worldview of an African American who has learned the oppression here and understands how deep the systemic racism or the prejudice goes, because in his quarrel and his conflicts going on in his head, they more have to do with war, crisis, famine, and hunger, and so if you ask him are you happy, are you okay, are you he's gonna say, well, yeah, there's food on the table, and there's nobody shooting guns at me, and I don't have to worry about my entire village of women being so there's always this. So just making sure that I would use Google to understand. That's what I'm saying. Get to know us just to get to know us. Not because of your need to attract information, but just the sense of getting to know us. But I also think that for organizations who have the funds to be able to hire consultants of color and hire individuals that could actually guide you through the processes, do it that way. Because I have been tokenized on so many boards where I know I'm sitting for free because I really need them to hear the experiences of my community. But I know that the information that I'm giving is going to go towards their equity wheel. That has nothing to do with me still, but I'm enriching it and I'm oiling it and I'm helping them be able to be better versed for our community. And so for a lot of people of color and people who come from these different communities, we have to sacrifice that piece of just we have to come from a humble and well, am I going to answer this, and help my people, or, you know what I mean? Or am I going to be, and stand my ground and be no, you're going to give me what my worth is, is deserved. And so this is the constant, struggle. But I also would think that if my close friends from the white community, this happens a lot, they come to me and they ask me these questions, but they have gotten to know me just to know me.
So there's longevity in our relationship. And I know that there's a mutual respect and a love there that is not asking me this question as an experiment to poke at me, but has a very humble curiosity of wanting to genuinely want to understand and, you know, and be a part of this with me rather than, you know, like just overseeing and being better in their other parts of their lives or their work and taking advantage of the information.
Like an exploitation.
Absolutely.
Right? An exploitation of someone in a very real way. I wanted to say something from my work eliminating white racism, which is there's a piece, Bridget, when you offered the two models, you know, do you ask someone or do you Google it? The third thing I just wanted to reference was that a lot of the work that I, as a raised white person, have to do is with my other people raised in the same culture. And it is work that involves going back to growing up, and the first time you realized you were something, and the first time you realized somebody else was different, the going back and thinking about the children's books that you were read that are just filled with racism oftentimes. In a similar way, the kind of racism that Samuel has now pointed out twice in the images we've offered as an invitation to come to this webinar and this conversation, and the songs and the fear you feel in your community, in your parents, in your teachers when someone in a wheelchair goes by. The odd way you watch adults when you're 3 years old yell at deaf people, you know, talk really oddly and loudly without any sense of connection or relationship. All these things are in us, and I think there's a deep necessity and value to actually going and figuring out how to get, you know, come together with other people who are on the oppressor side of these oppressions, for men to come together and just talk about what did they hear about women growing up? What did they learn? How did they see the men and the males in their family, in their world treat, you know, women and treat females and sisters and brothers? And so this is, I feel like, very much a third and very essential work that needs to happen. So we had a good conversation Tuesday among us. Chris and a bunch of us were talking about that. Probably we anticipated some of your questions were what to do when you live in a part of Maine that has very little racial or national diversity still. And Chris made the powerful point that if Lubeck, as an example, taught an actual history of Lubeck, it would be filled with diversity. And then we got to reference the kinds of diversities that exist in every community, which we here are representing. I said I'm going to be the lesbian for as long as there's an oppression, so I'll be the lesbian for this. But there's such diversity you can bring wherever you live in Maine, to your board, to your friends, to your community, to your family. That's my dog.
Thank you, Marty. So we're at 2:38 and there's so much more to talk about, but we will wrap things up for this discussion. And I put some links related to, you know, our panelists' websites and different links that have been shared with us. And our chat got very long, so I just tried to paste them again now, but all that to say, we are going to send an email out to all of our participants or attendees here today that will have that you know, much better formatted and easy to pull, so that you all can learn so much more about our guests here today. And truly thank you all, and thank you for your honesty and your willingness to chat with us today. It's been a pleasure to talk with you all every time, you know, both the last discussion and then when I've gotten to kind of pop in some of your meetings. You're all brilliant, and thank you for sharing your time and your gifts with us. And looking forward to learning more. And yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap things up. We will have this video posted on our different social media channels and YouTube and all that fun stuff to reference again later. And yeah.
It will have closed captioning when it's posted,
yes.
By the way. So that
yes. We're learning our technology here too. It turns out we need a third-party app to make the closed captioning work here live on Zoom, and yeah, we will definitely be looking into that. But yeah, the closed captioning will be embedded in our YouTube videos and also on social media as well.
And thank you. The people who came, to Mac, to all of you, to Art at Work, and to Meg and Martha and Ryan and David.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, I got you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.